All right, so in this video, I'll be covering two questions from 1.4 about mixtures. So here's one. We have a sample of a solid labeled NaCl may be impure. A student analyzes the sample and determines that it contains 75% chlorine by mass. Pure NaCl contains 61% mass, chlorine by mass. Which of the following statements is consistent with the data? So we had a sample, essentially. There's some sort of NaCl in here. Okay, that's what they assumed. NaCl should have a 61% mass of chlorine, but instead it is actually 75% chlorine. So looking at our answer choices, we can knock off A. That's not consistent with the data. If the sample only contained NaCl, that means it's pure, and that would mean it was 61% by mass. It's not, it's 75, so A is wrong. So without looking at the next three choices, let's talk about what we know. We know that the purity of, or not the purity, the percent of chlorine is too high. There's too much chlorine compared to whatever else is with the chlorine, okay? So we're looking for something that's bonded to the chlorine that has a lower molar mass than Na. If it had a higher molar mass than Na, then the chlorine percentage should be lower than 61% purity, but that's not what we're getting. We're getting something with a higher percentage of chlorine by mass, so that means there's a lower molar mass on whatever is bonded to it or with it. So looking at this example B, we have NaCl and NaI. Well, in this case, the chlorine would be the only source of chlorine by mass. So there's no way this could be the right answer because we need a higher percentage of chlorine. If I had no chlorine in the other sample, this NaI, then it would definitely be lower than 61%. So this cannot be the right answer. NaCl and KCl. Comparing the molar mass of Na versus K, K has a higher molar mass, and we're looking for something with a lower molar mass. This should have a lower than 61% chlorine percentage. And now the last one. So the C cannot be right either. D can be the only option. Let's check and make sure. NaCl and LiCl. Yep, this works because Na has a higher molar mass than Li, lithium. Lithium has a lower molar mass bonded to the chlorine, so D is the only option that's correct. All right, here's another practice problem. This is taken from a free response question. There was previous two questions, but we don't need them to answer this question. So a student, or just a student, is given a 10-gram sample of CaBr2, which is calcium bromide, that contains an inert, non-reacting impurity. Identify a quantity from results of a laboratory analysis that the student could use to determine whether the sample was pure. So for a question like this, there are actually a lot of answers that we can choose, and I'll put them all down. But they're just looking for a quantity. They're just looking for something that would work to determine if this is pure or not. So for example, if you in a lab and you did some analysis and you were able to determine the grams of calcium, could you figure out the purity? Yes. You could turn it to moles, you can figure out a mass percent of it, and you could determine if it's pure or not. If you figure out the moles of calcium, you also could figure out the purity of it. You have to get the moles from the grams anyway, so these are two possible answers. If you wrote, you could figure out the purity. You could also write the grams of Br, bromine, or moles of bromine. If you chose any of these 4 answers and just wrote that, grams of calcium, moles of calcium, grams of bromine, moles of bromine, you would get the answer right and full points for this question.